looking for trouble. All right, we'll go ahead. Let's see if Representative Hannah, what number are you? 17. If you'll open our meeting with a prayer, please.
Let's pray, please. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunities that you've given us and guide us and direct us in the path that you would have us to go. For us in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If everybody remember to turn off their electronic equipment they have with them today. And I'll go ahead and just remind you, please pay attention to the bulletin board outside of our office at 228 the Capitol. And then also, just be aware we're getting towards the time in the session where we are awfully busy, lots of meetings, lots of conflicts, and just keep an eye, check on things. I take it we have a video presentation coming up today. Video is good. We got our look, you know what? We're going to toss the coin in a minute, and we're going to see if you have one. Depends upon if my electronics guy gets it up and going. But please, everyone, just keep an eye, listen out also for announcements, because things can change rather fast as we get to this part of the session. And we'll have our GFA folks up who are going to explain to us what. Let me check with you just a second. So we're going to do the video. Okay. All right. So now we have to get, for our committee members, you should have a copy of the slides that you would have had anyway. So, okay. And do you want to sit at the table? Okay, come on up for the, and you can bring, Dan? Dan. Hey, Dan, that means he gets to pass it to you, so. What we're doing at the beginning of the session is we're having a series of presentations from the different agencies whose legislation usually comes before our committee. And also we're trying to take the time to do a little bit more in-depth study of our agencies and divisions. And so when we do have the bills and legislation, we're prepared for it. So Kevin, if you will go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe give an overview in the beginning. I want to point out to the committee that I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago that the legislative bodies started giving chores and duties to GFA as well as EPD in the areas of water and water supply, and they still are a financial arm for the state, so we're going to hear about all of that. So go ahead. Thank you very much, and take a second, introduce yourself, and it's your interlude.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Clark, the Director of the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, and Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the offer. As you stated, over the last several years, GFA has assumed more duties relative to water supply. I think in 2008, the legislature established the Reservoir Fund, funded it with $30 million in GO bond funds. To date, there's been little activity in that fund from a loan standpoint. We have made 2 loans out of it. And with the new water supply program, we really think that will enhance that loan program, and we're really looking forward to that. As you know, water supply projects, primarily reservoirs or impoundments, very expensive proposition. So a $30 million loan program or $30 million of loans isn't going to build much of a reservoir. So we've actually expanded that, and I'll go into a little more detail as we get into the program, where we're doing for water supply, we're doing what we call planning-only loans, so that a community can come in, receive a loan for the planning and permitting process. We've never done that before. So hopefully that'll help communities who need to get the ball rolling be able to fund that activity, because it is as you all know, it's a time-consuming process to get a project permitted from the federal standpoint. So we've instituted that program, and as we move forward, we anticipate we'll see a lot more activity on that front from the loan side. So, but we have our water division that handles the state revolving funds. It's the federal program, clean water and drinking water. And then we also have the Georgia Fund. which is our in-state fund, if you will, for loans. And it's a very successful program. In fact, last year we were able to essentially leverage a certain amount of the portfolio and return $288 million to the Treasury. And we still have capacity in that program of over $100 million for this year. So we're very comfortable that that program is very healthy and is sustainable. So again, we're grateful to the support that the legislature, the House, always gives us for that, and we'll try to do our best to manage it as well as we can. What I want to talk about today, if I could, is the water supply program. Last year in FY12, excuse me, we were appropriated, GFA and DCA were appropriated some funds to really begin the governor's water supply program. And so with that, I'm going to go into the specifics of it. In the handouts you have the presentation, but you also have the report or the program, if you will, a copy of that. It's not in depth. We've tried to keep it relatively, the easy to use type format. But and we spent a lot of time trying to keep a program as simple and as user-friendly as we could. And as we go through that, I hope you'll see that, and hopefully we will have accomplished that. So with that, I'll just start mumbling and bumbling. Last year, in January, Governor Deal issued an executive order which basically established the Water Supply Task Force, asking GFA, EPD, DNR, GSFIC, State Properties Commission, Ag, Soil and Water Conservation, those groups to get together and develop a program to assist local communities in water supply projects. So throughout the year, we met in several locations, went to Rome, Gainesville, Perry, Atlanta, and discussed what we would like to see this program look like. As this program is funded with GO bonds, there are a lot of strings, if you will, that are attached to those dollars. So it really forms, in a sense, what the program can do. From a loan standpoint, we can do a lot. From a what we call direct state investment, it limits us. And I'll get into all that, and I know I'm speaking gibberish right now, but I'll get into all that and hopefully explain it better. But the governor issued this executive order. We met, went through the process, developed the program that you have in front of you, submitted to the governor in December. He approved it in late December, and we are in the application taking business right now and go through the schedule at the end of this. But that was how we got started. And the program anticipates $300 million over the next, well, actually 2 more years or 3 more years. So that's the essence of it. The program is based off of really 4, we call them guiding principles, but you could call them the tenets of the program. And the program is that we're here to support local governments in their water supply development. That's what we see our role as. We feel like the funds should maximize water supply development. We recognize that each project is unique. You can't have a one-size-fits-all. So there has to be a certain amount of flexibility and ability to adapt the program to the needs of a project. And then, of course, regional cooperation is the preferred approach. We will go through competitive solicitations. We have, in fact, we're in that process now. We're in the application receiving phase. And we anticipate as funding becomes available each year, we will have a competitive process to award loans and the state direct investment. And as I mentioned, we have issued our first planning loan to Haralson County. We did that last month for their Beach Creek Reservoir. So we're starting to see some activity in that realm. The program has really 4 elements to it. The first is what we call state direct investment. And this is where the state, through DCA, will essentially buy an interest in a project. And it could be an asset. It can be a specific piece of property, or it can be a percentage, an undivided interest in that project. And so we've tried to create a way to where the state can can buy an interest in the project and get those funds to the local community. This is what I was talking about relative to the GO bond funds. With using GO bond funds, the state has to own that interest in some form or fashion. We can't grant those GO dollars. We have to, GO dollars are for improvements of the state. So we're buying an interest in a project. The state will own that. And then we intend to lease that interest back to the local community for up to 50 years. And then at the end of that lease period, the local government could buy back and has the right of first refusal to buy back that state interest at fair market value is determined at that time. And we have a formula way of doing that wherein appraisals will be had and it'll be done per State Properties Commission's guidelines at that time. But that's how that part would work, such that the local community would get some money up front, the state would buy that interest, and then after the lease period expires, then the local community would be able to buy the state out. And so essentially we're an investor. We're an investor in the project. But we would lease it back to them for a nominal fee. So it's not a loan per se. It gets them some money up front. State has that asset or that interest or that property. And then at the end of the period, the state would recoup those dollars. The loan program, what we recognized is that water supply projects, for the most part the reservoirs and impoundments, take a long time to permit, long time to build, and don't generate revenue for a significant amount of time. So we wanted to have terms from a loan standpoint that were workable for a community financially. So we decided we could amortize the loan over 40 years. We can do step interest rates to where as the loan is first initiated and the work's going on, there could be no interest for a period of years, then step up to the full interest rate when the project starts generating revenue. Or we can capitalize the interest. We can do any number of things, but we tried to leave the loan program very flexible and basically saying to the local communities, come tell us what you need to have financially to make the deal work, and let's see if we can structure our loan to help you do that. So we want to have that flexibility. That's why we have not set any type of rates like we have in our other loan programs like the Georgia Fund or the SRF. So we have no set rate, and we have no set amortization period. We have a maximum of 40 years. So we want to be able to tailor that loan to that specific project. One of the other things that the executive order tasked us with doing was to investigate and try to maximize public-private partnerships. And in that vein, as you guys are well aware, those are very, very specific arrangements and agreements and deals. It's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all. I would submit it's impossible to have a one-size-fits-all policy for P3 projects. So what we recognized, and we were tasked with in Senate Bill 122 from last year, is that we need to be prepared as the Environmental Finance Authority to assist local governments as they begin exploring P3 projects. How can we assist them? How can we help them? And so we've enlisted the support of some financial advisors, the Public Resources Advisory Group, who actually advises GSFIC. The Law Department has been kind enough to assign us a Special Assistant Attorney General who can help us through the P3 project process. So we're gearing up for if and when local communities come to us and say, we need some help. We've been approached with this project and we need some help with this. We're gearing up so that we can help the communities any way we can in making sure that everybody's on a level playing field when it comes to the negotiations and figuring out what's best for that community. Permitting has always been a problem, and I know you guys know that. One of the things that we recognized and what we heard from the local communities when they came and talked to us is that it's not so much the state side from a permitting standpoint as the federal side. That's the time-consuming process. And what can we do as the Water Supply Task Force, or GFA, expedite that? And the answer is not a whole lot. But what we can do is better promote the programs that exist. There are interagency coordinating councils that meet regularly to go over the status of projects. The Corps of Engineers has meetings once a month with their sister federal agencies to review projects, and we want to promote those programs. I don't think they're utilized enough, and I think those would be, if we can get those programs engaged, I think those will be most beneficial for tracking and following up on projects. So we need to do a better job of promoting those, and that's what we intend to do from a permitting standpoint. What kind of projects are eligible for the water supply program? Well, you have the obvious ones. Expanding or converting existing reservoirs, new reservoirs, interconnections between systems, wells, whether they're direct potable or stream flow augmentation, reopening inactive wells, desalinization, and aquifer storage and recovery. These are the types of water supply projects that the task force deemed to be eligible for this type of funding. Oh, okay. How the program is funded. Last year, y'all were kind enough to appropriate GFA $20.75 million for the loan program and $25 million for DCA for what we call the State Direct Investment Program. In the FY13 budget, there's a like request in GO bonds, and we would anticipate in FY14 and in FY15 similar requests. Put all that together with our existing reservoir fund, which was slightly less than $30 million, that brings us up to about $220 million. Then GFA will leverage the reservoir loan program, and if we have to, some of the Georgia fund to make up the $88 million. So that's how this $300 million is arrived at. $100 million of it will be for what we call the state direct investment, and $200 million of it will be for loans. So that's how the funding shakes out for this program. That's not set in stone. We could alter that if the needs are such that the loan program needs more and the state direct investment needs less, or vice versa. We could alter that. And as we go through this first round of applications, that's when we'll get a really good feel of what are the asks by the communities. But that's how the funding works. That's our $300 million, and we know that if we can leverage the reservoir fund, and that's part of the balancing act. We want to have real flexible terms that are very user-friendly, very friendly to the communities, but we also have to have a viable program. We have to keep it going. It's not a one-shot deal. So we want to make sure that that program is viable and will continue on, and we can leverage it. It has some value in the marketplace, because that's what we're going to have to do to reach the whole $300 million. From a time frame standpoint, we started taking applications, opened up the application process on January 10th, and are going through that now. We are going to hold 3 workshops to assist communities in essentially filling out their applications. But what are the documents that will be associated with this? What are the strings that are attached to getting the money, especially on state direct investment? What do those leases look like? What do those deeds look like? And so we're going to have these workshops beginning next Friday, and then the following 2 weeks after that. So the 24th, 2nd, and the 9th, we'll have these workshops. The first one will be at Gwinnett Technical College, the second one will be at Macon State, and the third one will be down in Tifton, where we'll go through with all the parties that are interested. This is what the application will look like. These are the things that we're going to the scoring. This is how that will work, etc., and hopefully answer a lot of the questions. The application period will close at the end of April, April 30th. That'll give us about 6 weeks to review the applications and make awards. The intention being that hopefully this year's appropriation will be approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, And if we do that, we would ask GSFIC to sell both FY12 and FY13's bonds sometime in the summer, and we would be able to award both years in one fell swoop. And that would be, I think, we would be able to see some activity from that. That would basically give us $50 million in state direct investment and over $70 million in loan funds to award this summer, presuming the appropriation in FY13 is approved. So, and with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Because there are going to be lots of questions. But first of all, for those, we have a lot of new members on our committee. We explain what GFSIC is so they can understand that terminology.
Too many acronyms.
Right.
Yeah, it's the Georgia State Financing Investment Commission. That's the commission that is essentially responsible for all the debt of the state. GSFIC issues the GO bonds for the state and is charged with the proper application of those funds. But GSFIC manages the debt of the state, and the commission itself is made up of the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker, commissioner of agriculture, attorney general, state auditor, and state treasurer.
Thank you. And we'll begin with our questions. Number 17, Representative Hanner.
Let me ask you something. On your eligible projects include ASR, Aqua Storage Recovery. Do you have, are any of those permitted or beginning?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
I know there's some talk of some.
Not that I'm opposed to it.
But I'm not aware of any that are in the permitting stage or even in the funded stage. But we want to consider those if somebody has a project.
All
like
the
that.
desalination the same way.
Yes,
Okay.
Aquifer storage recovery. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that terminology, but essentially it's a Floridan aquifer, and Representative Hanner, it's a lower and upper Floridan, and it's mainly in the southern, it stretches really across the southern part of our state.
But what they're talking about, if you don't mind, is actually they would store water in the aquifer and pull it back out at a later time. They do that in Tampa, Florida. We went down there several years ago to see their project, and it's just really something that's never been done. But we didn't want to, actually it was a bill to say you couldn't do that, and but it is an option, and I hope it remains a viable option in the future.
Right now there's a moratorium in the coastal area of the state on that, I believe. Now, where was we extended it for 4 more years about 2 years ago.
Is that right, Debbie?
Mm-hmm. We did.
Moratorium?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not, it's a moratorium, but it's not against the law, in other words, like the bill it first started to do.
I think it's just the coastal. I'll interject right here for those who are listening for the first time. Those who've been on the committee for a while, we sound like we're scientists because we've heard we've heard so much detailed information over the years, and really we do have to be students of these subjects, which is why we're doing this today. But I want to remind everybody that we have just gone through a very intensive planning process for all of our regions of the state, for our statewide water plans, and those areas will be defining what is important for their area. So GFA, so to speak, doesn't tell them what to do. It comes from the bottom up. So I want to just reemphasize that in case someone is hearing this and thinking something else. So thank you. My next number was 25. If you'll just identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chuck Williams, Oconee, portions of Clark, Morgan, and Oglethorpe County. And Madam Chair, I have 2 questions, but I will hold the second one to see if we have time. Director Clark, you talked about under the leasing program the 40-year lease period and then the buyout option. I know where I come from, oftentimes county commissions have big problems from one 4-year term to the next agreeing amongst themselves about water supply issues. So truly, what do we anticipate if at the end of the 40-year period a government entity does not exercise the buyout option? Do you seek to renew a lease, keep ownership, and take control? What happens if that occurs?
I would think both those options would be in play. You know, I would think that it would be, the option would be that, yes, they could do another lease. They could, you know, arrive at some negotiated deal. There are any number of things, but we want to leave that, we want to make sure that the intent of the program is that at the end of that, and presuming the supply project is generating revenue, is that now it would come back and we would do, you know, essentially keep the program rolling. But, you know, we again, with the use of the GO bonds, this is one of the things that another one of the strings that are attached makes it very difficult. You can't really say this is, you know, we're at the end of the period, we'll just deed it over to you.
Or a $1 buyout or something nominal like
we
that.
can't do that. So it's one of the strings that's attached. But at some point, I mean, you know, when those dates arrive, whether it's 40 or 50 years in the future, when that happens, then, you know, the option would be for the community to buy it out. But then I think there would be room for discussion on what else could occur. Does that make any sense?
Yes, thank you.
While you're asking that question, and with the local government issues, a lot of our local governments have a separate water authority. Could you speak to that? Because they really have more of a financial aspect to what they do. That's why your local governments create them. If you'll just, and that begs the question, how many of our local governments actually have created these authorities? I mean, that's something I think we need to know.
Well, we'll find out. I couldn't, I wouldn't
Yeah.
hazard a guess. But the use of the water and sewer authorities and utilizing those to really reflect and charge, for the most part, you know, the actual costs of the water and the services is great. And it also allows those folks different financing options. You know, the local communities have the same type of restrictions, if you will, that the state does. They can't spend more than they bring in, et cetera. But the water and sewer authorities actually have more flexibility when it comes to financing different types of different financing arrangements, whether it's revenue bonds, GFA loans. Of course, local communities can get us. But there's any number of things that the authorities have a little more leeway in how they conduct their business. So it is very beneficial from that standpoint.
Thank you. And we'll get back to you. Number 21.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had two things, and one kind of follows on with Representative Hanner in terms of your initial interest in this, the types of projects that people are saying, you know, we're interested in trying to do, because, you know, we do anything, we're talking about anything from surface water to wells to reservoirs. Has there been what has been the initial way of what has been the initial interest there in terms of what they're trying to do? And the second thing, I think everybody would probably want to know this: how do you interact with DCA on the planning? I get things all the time from DCA saying that they are doing something in my district. You know, we're granting this much money, and sometimes it'll be connected to water, sewer, you know, something like that. How does GFA interact with DCA on these projects?
Okay. On the first question, excuse me, the folks that have approached us, and we haven't received any applications yet. As a practical matter, we've said hold off on submitting them until after we have our workshops, you know, because that'll save time. But the folks who have met with us and others have been primarily, you know, reservoirs. You know, the projects I think most folks have heard of that are in the permitting process. Those folks have met with us and wanted to understand how the program works. What are the financing options? What are the loan terms? How can they, you know, get their financial folks start to thinking about how can we structure our financing to work with a loan program, et cetera. So it seems to be right now. We've had a couple of folks about wells, you know, but other than that, these have just been really preliminary conversations, nothing in depth. Relative to our interaction with DCA, of course, we're administratively attached to DCA, and we rely on them when it comes to our ability to make loans that they've, you know, if a community is a water first community, things like that. But relative to their planning functions and what they do, we rely on EPD more from a review of the project and that sort of interrelationship. Relative to DCA, we don't interact with them a whole lot on their planning activities.
If somebody came to you, if somebody went to DCA looking for these types of services, they would refer them to you,
Yes.
I would assume, because I'm not as familiar with you as I am with DCA, and I refer people to them a lot of times, and it may be something that they'll bring back to you.
They would, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we operate, and of course Commissioner Beatty's on our board, so we interact with DCA continually. So we're not strangers. So yeah, they would refer folks to us in a heartbeat.
Okay, thank you. That was too many questions.
No, that's all right. Thank you. Number 23.
I apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Clark, for your presentation. I guess I'm coming from a more practical business aspect of this. We had a presentation by the Corps of Engineers back during several months ago.
Yeah.
But at that time, I remember the gentleman that presented there saying that probably, and you said very expensive, but a reservoir construction could run in the billion-dollar range. Is that correct?
We've heard, I mean, and it's quite a wide range. I mean, everything depends on where, how big, how much, all that sort of thing. We've heard ranges from 300 million to a billion.
To a billion.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
All right, and if we're going to construct these on a 50-year lease program with a buyout at the end, what occurs to me, and I know you want it to be regional, but the need for these reservoirs are probably going to be in your larger metropolitan areas, your more populated areas. But the construction is probably going to be in a more rural area because the metropolitan area simply does not have maybe the water supply nor the place to build a reservoir. How do we anticipate this happening? Because I can see right now creating some water wars between your places that have the natural resources and the people that need the natural resources.
Well, I think the one thing that I would stress is that the basic premise of what we're doing is that we're trying to assist the owner or the sponsor of that project, which would be the local government. We as the GFA or the state are not, we don't view this program as us getting into the water supply business. So, the way I've tried to look at it is if somebody has a project and but for some dollars they would bring it to the finish line, then that's what we're trying to do, is to get those dollars to them to bring it to the finish line and make that project complete. So we're not looking at it from a standpoint of are these projects and we're not. Let me try to rephrase this. We're not trying to look at it from any type of permitting standpoint. We're really looking at it as a financial transaction. What can the project be sustainable? Does it look like in the future it'll pay for itself? But we're not trying to judge it on whether there are any interbasin transfers or does it have endangered species or what are the risks to it. We're not looking at that. We're looking. That's EPD, EPA, Corps, Fish and Wildlife. That's their role, and we don't want to get into that role, and they would probably throw us out if we did. But so I know I'm not really answering your question very well, but I think for us, we're not looking to drive where the project goes. We're looking to assist a community once they've made all those determinations and they've gone through the process. They've looked at the alternatives as they would have to under the permitting process, and so we're not really weighing in on where should it go or what's the best location for it. I don't think I answered it, but
Well, you did, and I happen to live in a community that has a reservoir, the only county-owned reservoir in the state, and possibly only one or few in the nation. And I know that, of course, they built it in 1930, and it didn't cost them $1 billion. But and I'm looking at the thousands of acres of land that are necessary in order to build a reservoir, because you're going to flood that, and the problems that are going to be involved there. And I'm wondering if governing authorities, again, this governing authority, local governing authority, wants this reservoir, needs this reservoir. This governing authority, where the location may be to supply that area, is is looking at it from an entirely different standpoint, and you're not involved in that. I understand that, but I just wonder if this is going to ever work, if the state is not involved. That's
it would be for wiser folks than me to weigh in on that, but I see your point.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. We have time for about 3 more questions. So the next one is number 14, then it'll be 24, and then 25 again.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lee Anderson, District 117. My question is the reopening of inactive wells. How many, do we have a record of how many that's inactive and why they were inactive and why they wanting to put them back in activity?
I don't have any record of that. I could see if EPD might, but we don't. We included that as part of an eligible project. Just if somebody wanted to do it or needed to do it, we would certainly consider that as a eligible project, but we don't have any idea of what the backup demand is or what projects there would be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Number 24.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lynn Riley, North Fulton County. My questions are about the financing part. Has there a threshold been set for a maximum amount that a project could be awarded? And I'm thinking in order to be able to provide for the most projects across the state. And the second part is there a expected maximum or minimum participation by the local government as far as funding? Do they have to provide 50% of the project in order to have the skin in the game, so to speak?
To answer your first question, we have not set a maximum per project because our intention is to, this being our first go round, we wanted to see what is the ask, because it would be, in our minds, it would be presumptuous of us to, I could see where we have these different categories of projects and we say we're only going to award so much in each category, and if we didn't get an application and reopening wells, then that money would have to flow around. So what we thought we would do is this go around, let's see what the ask is, and let's see where the money needs to go. So, I'm sorry.
Are you contemplating awarding the entire amount? So with the first round of applications? No, with the first round of applications.
Oh, no, we can only award, or we're only going to award the dollars that we would have in hand.
Okay.
So that's why I said for this go around, presuming we get the FY13 appropriation, then we would have $50 million in direct state investment. That's 2 years at 25.
Right.
And then all of our loan funds that would be available would be about $70 million. So that's what we would award. And then, about this time next year, we would, presuming we're in the budget and everything's going forward, we would do the same thing again.
Great.
And so that's the intention. We wouldn't commit what we don't have.
Okay, that's good to know.
So then, so we thought, let's see what we have, and we know that there are going to be some projects that could, essentially if we wanted to fund just one, we could eat up everything we have.
Right.
And that's not the intention. It's to, again, the idea is to see what the projects are, what their finances are. We haven't set a minimum skin in the game, a percentage, but in the scoring, where you are with your finances and what your participation level is scored. So it's considered, but it's not a minimum threshold to get scored. Let's see what it is that you have, what your financing is, and then how can we fit in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And number 25.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Clark, at one time I know the U.S. Department of Agriculture through their Rural Development Agency had a fairly robust loan and grant program for rural communities for water and sewer. Do you know whether that program is still viable, and if so, do you anticipate them being at the table as one of the partners possibly for rural communities?
I believe the program's still in operation. We interact with communities who may borrow money from, I'm probably telling you something you already know, but
I don't know the current status.
Okay. I don't know exactly what their funding level is, but I do know that there are communities that will come to us for a bridge type loan. So because with the with USDA, you have to get your project built and then they reimburse you. So they'll come to us and get bridge loans and then pay us off when they get their money. So I know it's still in operation, but I couldn't tell you the funding level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And one final question, I guess, for me is, I noticed in your recommended eligible projects, is there any consideration to a process that would use sewer treatment plant that could also develop small containments to recycle that water for like gray use or something like that. Has that been looked at all?
Not from just the pure standpoint of that plant doing, if it's not developing new supply,
Okay.
but if it's a plant that's associated with new supply, yeah, it'd be eligible. But if it's let's take a plant and let's take our existing supply and put it into non-potable use or gray water or something, we haven't considered that type of project. We're really focused in on what are new supplies. But again, if you had a treatment plant necessary for that from a well or whatever you're doing, yeah, that would be eligible for it.
And for a long time, you've had local assistance. You've had assistance dollars for our local governments in the areas of what they define as local governments, like sewage. That hasn't ended.
No.
All right, I think we need to let people understand this is a new direction here. But if you'll just briefly state what has constantly been available and will continue to be. I think that'll help some of our questions here.
Okay. Again, on our loan side, we have really 4 programs. The one we discussed in depth today, which is the Reservoir Fund. Then we have the Clean Water SRF, State Revolving Fund, basically federally funded. You guys are kind enough every year to appropriate us match dollars for that. It's the traditional 80-20. But the federal government provides the clean water and drinking water SRFs. Those are programs that we utilize and are very popular with communities. In fact, our interest rate now for the clean water and drinking water SRFs is 2.13%. That's pretty cheap. That's a pretty reasonable loan amount. And for projects that are conservation-based, we knock off a point off of that. So for conservation-based projects, that would be 1.13% for federally eligible conservation projects. Those programs are doing well. I mean, just like anybody else, the federal government has been minnowing those down, but they're still healthy. Between our 4 programs, we anticipate having over $300 million of capacity for this year to loan out. And we don't see that changing. This program, the water supply program, is in addition to, it's not taking from anything.
Right.
It's in addition to. Drinking water, I mean, clean water is, it's kind of water, it's for sewer work. Drinking water is, as it states, for drinking water. And the Georgia Fund is for both, and that's the state-funded program. The advantage of the Georgia Fund is that it's state, so you don't have all the federal hoops to jump through to get the dollars. But with the federal program, you do have to go through the all the federal hoops, but you go through that, it makes it worth your while from a interest reduction standpoint. So that's how we have the program structured. But there's no sacrificing of any program that exists now to promote this water supply.
I think all of us realize as we're delving or diving into this issue that it's very complex. So your time with us today has been invaluable, and I want to thank y'all for this. And believe me, you will be getting questions. So are you available to our committee members?
Anytime.
Okay. And your number's on the front of this.
Yeah, I've got the number and contact information on the presentation, so feel free.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
appreciate it.
we're not adjourning yet. Buddy Harden has an announcement he'd like to make.
Yeah, the subcommittee on water will meet this afternoon in room 403 at the Capitol at 2 p.m. and we'll be looking at the resolution that we passed last year from Chairman J. Neal.
And hearing only.
Hearing only.
Hearing only. Okay. And please, again, pay attention to the bulletin board in front of our office, and we will get messages out to you and also announcements from the well to try and keep you posted. And thank y'all very much. We're adjourned.